Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Jared Pratt, and joining us today from the Australian Army is musician Noah Georgeson. This evening, we're joined by the members of the 48th Parliament of Australia, pausing here in the commemorative area of the Australian War Memorial to reflect on the freedoms afforded to us as Australians. Freedoms underpinned by those who have served our nation in the Australian Defence Force. At the opposite end of Anzac Parade from the Parliament, this institution and the stories it tells remind us of what it means to be Australian, committed to one another and to this nation. Here with us this evening are the men and women elected by Australians to make the decisions that build and protect our nation, including the deployment of members of the Australian Defence Force across the globe. The roll of honour cloaking us reminds us of the cost of those decisions, as does the physical and emotional toll on those who have served. The presence here this evening of members representing the 48th Parliament of Australia speaks to every Australian of your commitment to the deep responsibility to never forget individual sacrifices made in our name, devotion to duty and our country. This evening, we're honoured to acknowledge the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, the Leader of the Federal Opposition, the Honourable Susan Lee, and all members and senators of the 48th Parliament of Australia who are joining us here this evening. We're also honoured to acknowledge the President of the Marshall Islands, Her Excellency Hilda C. Haney, accompanied by His Excellency Paul Wilson, Australian Ambassador to the Republic of the Marshall Islands, Chief of the Defence Force, Admiral David Johnson, and the accompanying senior defence leadership, the National President of the Returned and Services League of Australia and member of the Australian War Memorial Council, the Honourable Peter Tinley, and representing the Chair of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, Wing Commander Sharon Bowen, retired, and members of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, Ms Lorraine Hatton, the Honourable Warren Snowden, Major General Wade Stoddard, retired, and the Director of the Australian War Memorial, Mr Matt Anderson. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by guests to the memorial. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. I would like to invite the Prime Minister of Australia, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, to the lectern.
I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge Her Excellency Hilda Heine, President of the Republic of the Marshall Islands. I also acknowledge the Leader of the Opposition and all of my colleagues from across the Parliament. Admiral David Johnson, Chief of the Defence Force, and senior officers from across the services. The Honourable Peter Tinley, the National President of the RSL. Alison Frame, Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Wing Commander Sharon Bone, representing the Chair of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, and Matt Anderson, Director of the Australian War Memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, we come here each year carrying the simplest of phrases in our hearts, lest we forget. It comes down to us through the years, 4 syllables tapping softly but steadily like a heartbeat. We hear it in every corner of the earth made hallowed by our fallen, every military cemetery and every battleground, every cenotaph and war memorial in every city and every country town, every old photograph in which the smile and the eyes refuse to fade. Every letter in which a long silent voice lives on, sometimes laconic, sometimes humorous, and so often aching with longing for home and a reunion with loved ones that never came. Lest we forget is the foundation stone of this sacred place. It is both a vow and a reminder. In all its solemn power, it begins every parliamentary year for the same reason the War Memorial and Parliament House face each other across the lake. To remind us that the spirit of democracy that our national parliament embodies is built upon the spirit that permeates these very walls. Generations of Australians have served in our name with a spirit that has never bent to tyranny. They have served with courage, with character, with humanity. Just as Australia has offered refuge to those fleeing the darkness, Australians in uniform have stood as a beacon of hope to the world. And all too often, they have paid the greatest price. All around us here, the names of our fallen and the places they fell are mapped out in constellations of sacrifice. Each name the heart of its own universe of grief. Yet as we reflect on all this loss and every shoulder that has borne its burden, we find its counterweight in all that we have gained because of them. All that we have been able to hold on to as a people and as a nation because of them. When Prime Minister John Curtin spoke at the opening of the Australian War Memorial on Remembrance Day in 1941, the Second World War had already been raging for more than 2 years and was only months from reaching our shores. Curtin understood the gravity of that threat, yet he looked to the future, to what he called a peace worth the winning, a peace worthy of all the courage, the sacrifice and the faith that Australians had shown to win it. When the war finally ended, his successor Ben Chifley spoke of those who had fought the darkness but not lived to see the light. As he implored the nation, let us remember those whose lives were given that we may enjoy this glorious moment and may look forward to a peace which they have won for us. Let us remember those whose thoughts, with proud sorrow, turn towards gallant loved ones who will not come back. Nothing can fully repay the debt we owe them, nor can history record in adequate terms their deeds. Chifley was right. But we go on, honouring our debt as best we can by honouring every single Australian who fell, every Australian who came home, every Australian who came home but never left the battle, every Australian who has served, and every Australian who serves now. And we remember them. Time marches on relentlessly, but we do not let it become a thief. Together we tend memory like a flame, ensuring its glow can be passed into the hands and indeed the hearts of generations of Australians to come, so that many years from now, they too will look back with gratitude and pride, drawing together as we do today to say those three critical words, lest we forget.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I now invite the Leader of the Federal Opposition, the Honourable Susan Lee, to the lectern.
I acknowledge the Prime Minister, distinguished guests, parliamentary colleagues, and most importantly, veterans. At the outset of another parliamentary term and in this 125th year of our Commonwealth, we gather here at the Australian War Memorial. We gather to remember, to recognise and to reflect. We gather to remember those we have lost. We gather to recognise the sacrifice they have made for us. And we gather to reflect on the duty we owe them. No Australians more thoroughly embodied our values than those who have worn and now wear the uniforms of the Australian Defence Force. As a Member of Parliament and as the Leader of the Opposition, standing in this place is among the greatest of honours. There is a reason our Parliament and the Cabinet Room has a direct line of sight to this place. Because this war memorial is the seat of our national soul. It is a reminder of the true cost of sending Australians to war. This memorial is a reflection of the Australian ethos. Australians do not glorify conflict, nor do we have time for hollow gestures or grand statements. The 103,000 names on the walls around us are cast in basic bronze and marked with simple poppies. The austere memorial around us is an apt setting that speaks to Australian stoicism. We are a practical people, and moments like today are not about memorials or stones. They are about recognising the service and stories of our fallen and injured. Because no memorial can ever sufficiently contain the horror and the pain endured by those who have served and those who have sacrificed. No memorial can replicate the reality of war, the whistle of artillery rounds as they hurtle towards the trench, the smell of burning diesel, the thud as the chopper lands, the ringing vibration as the IED hits, the crack of the rounds, the shouts, the dust, the screams in the night, the tourniquets, the adrenaline, the jokes, the heat, the pain, the loss, the rage. As any digger will tell you, they don't do it for the memorials, they do it for their mates. They do it for each other and they do it for their country. They serve for us. And that service is made up of moments we can never truly capture, understand, or sufficiently repay. This service is fused into our national consciousness and has protected the incredible country we all have the privilege of being part of. Honouring the sacrifices of our defence personnel and their families also demands honest conversations and straight talk from our national leaders too. Gathered in this quiet courtyard of contemplation, in the shadow of Mount Ainslie, we cannot allow ourselves to be lulled into a false sense of security. As parliamentarians, we will be returning to that place across the lake to help navigate our country through a changing world. Indeed, we must lead through a period of great peril. Our world is changing. Old patterns of behaviour are re-emerging. A land war in Europe continues. There is an unprecedented military build-up in our region. New navies stride the Indo-Pacific and flex their strength. The pace and scale of technological change is difficult to comprehend. Dark clouds are gathering across the world. These dark clouds demand hard decisions and urgent action. Old truths are being rediscovered as countries wake up to this deteriorating global security environment. As the more than 103,000 names around us today illustrate, Australians heed the call to serve their nation, and I believe they would do so again. That service is part of the DNA of our people, and it's in our national character. The Australian spirit that was forged among the cliffs of Gallipoli, in Hellfire Pass and Changi, that was fused as Australians stood against imperialism and fascism in the mud of Pozières and the jungles of Kokoda. The Australian grit that stared down communism and autocracy amid the shale and stone of Kapyong and amongst the rubber trees of Long Tan. The Australian character that drove us to keep the peace in Timor, Rwanda and Somalia. And that Australian valour which echoed across the rocky valleys of Uruzgan. As we channel that service and sacrifice today as members of Parliament, we must also commit ourselves to do everything within our power to equip our next generation with what they need to serve. I know I speak for all Australians when I say today we honour those who have served and sacrificed, those who have given so much and endured unspeakable horrors so that we may live in this great country. We thank them for their service. We will remember them, lest we forget.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. For those that are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will be now laid at the base of the pool of reflection in the following order. The Prime Minister of Australia, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, and the Leader of the Federal Opposition, the Honourable Susan Lee. The President of the Marshall Islands, Her Excellency Hilda C. Haney. The President of the Senate, Senator the Honourable Sue Lyons, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honourable Milton Dick. The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence, the Honourable Richard Marles, and the Minister for Veterans Affairs and Minister for Defence Personnel, the Honourable Matt Keogh, and the Shadow Minister for Defence and Interim Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs, the Honourable Angus Taylor. The Minister for Defence Industry and Minister for Pacific Island Affairs, the Honourable Pat Conroy, and the Shadow Minister for Defence Industry and Shadow Minister for Defence Personnel, the Honourable Melissa Price. The Assistant Minister for Defence, the Honourable Peter Khalil, the Shadow Assistant Minister for Defence, Mr Philip Thompson, and the Special Envoy for Defence, Veterans Affairs and Northern Australia, Mr Luke Gosling. Chief of the Defence Force, Admiral David Johnson, and National President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, the Honourable Peter Tinley. Representing the Chair of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, Wing Commander Sharon Bowen, retired, and the Director of the Australian War Memorial, Mr Matt Anderson. And the final wreaths this evening will now be laid by visitors to the memorial.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Major Cyril Herbert Dodson Lane. Cyril Lane was born on the 23rd of February 1888 in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, New South Wales. He was the son of Herbert J. Dodson and his wife Eliza. Cyril's father died when he was just a baby, and his mother Eliza remarried shortly after to parliamentarian and Liberal candidate Herbert William Lane. Cyril grew up in the town of Armidale alongside his stepbrother Lionel and his stepsister Phyllis. He received his education at the Armidale School, where he was a keen member of the cadets program. On completion, he returned to the city and began studying engineering at Sydney Technical College. Cyril remained active in military life throughout this period, eventually rising to the rank of captain in the Citizens' Forces. When the First World War broke out in August 1914, Cyril Lane was quick to enlist. He joined the Australian Naval and Military Expeditionary Force and travelled to Rabaul in German New Guinea. There, the Expeditionary Force was tasked with destroying German radio stations. By September 1914, German New Guinea was under Allied occupation, and Lane returned to Australia in early 1915 for discharge. At the end of January that year, Cyril married his sweetheart, Evan McClurkin. Soon after his marriage, Cyril Lane applied for a commission in the Australian Imperial Force. In early May 1915, he was appointed captain and was assigned to the 18th Infantry Battalion. After a short period of training, Lane was promoted to major. He set sail with his unit from Sydney in June 1915 aboard the troop ship Ceramic. After reaching Egypt, he continued training with his unit. They landed at Anzac Cove on Gallipoli on the 22nd of August 1915 and took up positions around Russell's Top. There, the 18th Battalion would take part in their first major battle that same day. The 18th was tasked with capturing a low rise in the foothills known as Hill 60. Its capture would allow Allied forces to consolidate the narrow strip between the Australian and New Zealand positions with those of the British at Suvla Bay. The initial attack on the 21st of August had failed to capture the hill, and Lane's unit would be drawn into the second attempt. Though they were inexperienced troops, they went into action, but were gradually pushed back by enemy fire from the high ground. After sustaining heavy casualties, the attack was abandoned later that day. With Hill 60 still in enemy hands, a further attack went ahead on the 27th of August in a similarly ill-planned attempt to capture the heights. On the morning of the attack, Lane wrote to his mother from his dugout, "My dearest mother, we have had many exciting experiences since I last wrote, and last Sunday I was in action and saw the real thing for the first time. Although we have been under fire ever since we landed. In fact, as far as I can see, there is no really safe spot here, and one takes a risk wherever one goes. So far, I am very well and did not get a scratch on Sunday. I think the nearest bullet skidded along my boot. Unfortunately, we lost a good number of officers and men. I am taking 100 men out this afternoon to cooperate with the New Zealanders in an assault. We leave at 4 p.m. Well, Mother, I cannot say anything else, as this letter will be censored, and this is just a short note to let you know I am thinking of you, Phyllis, and all." In 3 days of intense and confused fighting, their objective was taken, lost, and then taken again. With the heights still not captured, the attack was called off on the 29th of August, 1915. The 18th Battalion alone had suffered the loss of 50% of their fighting strength. Among the dead was Major Cyril Lane, whose body was found on the south side of Hill 60, riddled with bullets from an enemy machine gun. One of his men, Corporal Rose, recalled Lane's final moments, saying, "We saw the Major stand up on the parapet before leading the men out when he was shot dead. Every man in the battalion would have followed him to the ends of the earth after the first charge. He was a fine officer." Major Cyril Lane was 27 years old. Less than 6 months later, his wife gave birth to their only child, a daughter named Evelyn. At the war's end, Major Lane's body could not be located. Today, he is commemorated at the Lone Pine Memorial on the Gallipoli Peninsula, among almost 5,000 others who have no known grave. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Major Cyril Herbert Dodson Lane, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hopes of a better world.
If you're able, please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or at the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.